Good day to you. Stuart here at Strength for Tomorrow Radio. It's Friday again, which means it's time for another episode. And this is what you've been waiting for all week, especially the joke of the week. You always get good reports on that. Last week, we discussed prenatal training or antenatal training if you're into whatever, Greek or Latin or whatever it is, and you want to try and pretend that you're all educated. This week, we're going to discuss postnatal training, some nutrition advice, and what is it's going to look like basically, and some things to consider after you have had a baby. So you've had your beautiful baby, boy or girl, doesn't matter, they're all beautiful, not right? You're adjusted to interrupted nights of sleep, you know, your eyes are hanging out of you, now you want to get moving again, or you just want to start moving. If you weren't moving before you got pregnant, where do you start? What do you do? What should you not do? Keep listening and you might just get some inspiration for workouts, some nutrition, and some other things to bear in mind after you've had a baby, or at least get pointed in the right direction. So we didn't really discuss the birth and delivery on the last episode, so I thought it would be good to discuss this week's topics in some sort of chronological order. So obviously labour and then the delivery. You don't need me to tell you because I'm sure your birthing classes will, you know, we're all supposed to go to, aren't we, men and women nowadays, will tell you all about it. But I've noticed that there are certain principles from training that are really applicable to labour. And I know like people are going, "Oh, come on, Stuart! You see applications everywhere from training." But really, this is really good because this is my podcast and we're talking about postnatal fitness, and and you. So I'm gonna apply it because they are applicable, and it's not 100% exactly the same, obviously, but you can apply these principles to both, and it should make sense. So first one is breathing. Now, breathing is a massive topic whenever it comes to labour and birth and all that. Some people go out there and embrace all sorts of wizardry and, you know, try and help them. Some people go for hypnosis and all sorts of things to get them through it. But whatever your thoughts or approach are to that, the undeniable fact is that breathing does matter, funnily enough. You never thought you'd be listening to this so that I could tell you that breathing matters. What a bombshell, eh? But it's important when it comes to training, and it's important when it comes to labour. The ability to control breathing and to manage it is sometimes the difference between the top athletes in the world. If you compare, I guess CrossFit is probably the most the easiest one to compare, but if you compare the top CrossFit athletes, obviously they're really fit and the fittest guy always wins or the fittest girl always wins, but how they compete, how they execute their capacity for fitness, it's how they control their breathing quite often, it's how they manage. It's how they interpret how they're breathing. Are they breathing too heavy? They need to back off. So breathing correctly, whenever you do a heavy set of squats or deadlifts, it is imperative to completing the job without feeling it in your back or feeling, you know, somewhere you shouldn't feel it. If you want to keep your lower back safe, you have to breathe correctly, and you create that tension. But if you focus on your breathing during birthing, it can really help you concentrate on the task at hand. It impacts how your pelvic floor and core muscles are able to operate, switching on, switching off, and how you manage the pain as well. That's quite important, obviously. So how do you do it? It really is it's really similar to heavy weightlifting. I'm going to draw this comparison a few times in this episode because it really is applicable. Any ladies out there who lift heavy will understand why, and if you don't understand why, go start doing some heavy squats or deadlifts, and then you'll know that I'm not talking through my hat. Basically, it's called the Valsalva maneuver. You can look it up. You take in a big breath, and not only are you trying to think about filling your lungs, you're also thinking about pushing your diaphragm down and expanding your belly too. This is exactly what you do whenever you just before you do a heavy back squat. The difference is when you're trying to push a baby out and when you do this, the perineum, the tissues around your vagina will expand. So that's a bit different, obviously. You're not thinking of that when you're going into a heavy set of squats, are you? Or a heavy deadlift? Hopefully not. Where the other difference, I guess, is it comes whenever you exhale. So you will think about breathing down rather than out. So down through your torso, from your diaphragm to your vagina. Practice makes perfect. So if you're going to give birth soon, you might want to start practicing this. It's much easier to do these things before you've got a human about to appear. It's less unsettling, I would say, and concentrate better. Don't be afraid also to make sounds. Whenever you're in in the birthing room, and whenever you're in labour, don't be afraid to make sounds when you're inhaling or exhaling. That can really help you emphasize and focus on the breathing better. It's your day. You do whatever you want. Other people are just spectators, really, aren't they? Put it crudely. Try and relax your head and your neck and your jaw and all right around that area. Don't let any pressure build up there. Place your hands in front at the bottom of your ribcage to get a physical feel of where the air is actually going. Effectively, you're trying to breathe the baby out. If you can get your head around that concept. Something else that can help with the delivery, with the birth and labour and all of that, is your mindset. So how you control your emotions is really, really important, just as it is whenever you're training. If you allow fear, anxiety, stress, worry, pressure to overcome you, it can mean that things will not run as smoothly as they otherwise could do. It's easy for me to say, obviously, being a man and all that, but that doesn't make it any less true. We all know that our emotions can get the better of us, and it produces a physical outcome for good or bad. Like if you're going for a job interview and you're nervous and you're, I've never heard, big sweaty armpits, won't you? Going to be big patches down the sides. If you're a singer and you're a bit nervous, all of a sudden you're going to really back off in those high notes because your mouth and your throat, everyone's not going to open up the same. You're not going to be as free and you're not going to be as loose. If you're stressed or scared, it can actually cause your very posture to kind of fold over, and maybe without you realising it, you almost go into the fetal position again, for protection. If you approach your labour feeling in control, not rushed or panicked, scared, you'll be able to think more about controlling things, going through the process, going through what you're doing, focusing on the moment, focusing on what you're actually able to control. And taking charge of things in a really relaxed way it'll with confidence. You can have confidence in the staff that are around you, whether it's a midwife or a doctor, and whoever else you have in the room, whether it's your husband or partner or whatever, to encourage you and to help you focus rather than stressing you out. And surprisingly, it can help things go much smoother than the alternative. Someone's running around the room like a headless chicken. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Oh, I can't breathe. That's not going to help, is it? Sweating profusely, sitting in the corner rocking. I think I was eating a bag of beef jerky just before Karen started going for it. whenever we were in with Olivia, and because I hadn't really ate all day, and I felt bad eating. Karen's in pain there. She obviously eating was the last thing in her mind, and I sort of felt bad. But I think chilled out is the best approach, and I'm sticking to that. So if someone else shows nerves, chances are it's going to make you really nervous too, right? Another important aspect when it comes to birthing is the control. So you're in control of it. You might think it's a midwife, you might think it's you're in control. We've all seen the movies whenever the midwife or the doctor is commanding operations and telling the expectant mother to push, but in reality, you will know when it is best to push, and whenever you really go for it, you are more in tune with how your body's feeling, the sensations that you're experiencing than the very best doctor or midwife in the world. You will know better. I remember the midwife that we had, my wife and I, she was called Patricia, amazing lady, really, really lovely lady. She was fantastic. She kept asking my wife though if she felt ready to push, and that's really important. Is that they're consulting with you, and they're not telling you, they're not commanding you, because that can make you feel pressured, it can make you feel rushed, and then stress goes up, and worry, anxiety, all that stuff goes up because you're trying to push and you're not ready to push. So yeah, she was great. She really encouraged her, and whenever it was go time, it was go time. She really helped her get going and coached her through it. So yeah, being stressed and anxious is not a good way to be. Like we said earlier, the amazing thing is you have this innate built-in sense to know when to push. Every mother who's ever been through it will tell you, you'll just know, and that's pretty cool. An important aspect of when you're doing weights is the rest periods, and I can't emphasize this enough, because there's lots of my clients who come to the gym and they just want to go all the time, and they'll do a set and then they'll want to rest for 30 seconds and go again. And I would tell them, you need to rest 3 minutes, you need to rest 4 minutes. You're trying to get stronger, you need to rest longer. So the rest time is important. Depending on what your goal is, you need to make sure your rest periods are long enough, and they are right for what you're trying to achieve. So they're really important in birthing as well. You just can't keep pushing and pushing and pushing all the time. You can't just keep working all the time. Not only will you be exhausted, but it's also been shown to be quite ineffective. You'll not get very far, and the baby won't get very far. You want to allow your uterus to do the work. Think of it as a, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of scenario. So with every contraction, the baby moves forward 2 steps and then moves back 1 step. But still further on than it was before, right? Still with 1 step, but sometimes it's easy to just tighten up, and what can happen is you can put strain on your perineum and pelvic organs, which is important to avoid doing that. You want to rest and relax the muscles when it's possible in between the contractions. Choosing a setup that's right for you. Whenever it comes to squats or bench press or certain exercises, there's some fundamentals that are just non-negotiable. So your heels stay down in the squats. There's lots of other things as well. We could go into details, but there's some things that are non-negotiable. There's some things that you just always have to do in a certain way, because outside of this, the risk of injury greatly increases, as well as the loss of effectiveness. But there are some things, about your stance in a squat, maybe, how far your heels are apart, how much you point your toes out, all those sort of things, where you grip a bench press or what you do with your elbows. There are certain things that are quite personal and depend on your individual anatomy. You'll find a position that best suits you, the length of your femurs and your hip connection, all those things. Similarly, whenever you're labouring, not everyone might be suited to just lying on their back on a bed and hoping it's over soon. Some people feel better standing up, some people feel better lying on their side, maybe squatting, leaning forward, holding on to something, sitting, standing with your hands on your knees, rocking. There are lots of different options, and many women, I guess, don't realise this. Having chatted to some over the years, and then I was quite surprised by this as well, but lots of different setups. So it is kind of similar to strength training, to weight training. There are certain things that you might need to change about your setup, and they might work at different times during labour. Different things might work at different periods of time as you progress through. Maybe you need to get up in the bed and lie. Core training is something that before you even get to the birthing room, it's really important to do your core and pelvic floor training regularly, and I can't stress this enough. Nobody does it. Nobody ever listens. All the birthing classes tell you to do it. Your midwife probably tells you to do it. Your doctor tells you to do it. Your sister who's had a baby tells you to do it. Everybody tells you to do it, but you never do it. Why do you not do it? Just do it. Do it when you're in the car. Set a reminder. Just do it. The reason being, it does set you up well for labour and birth, and even just developing that awareness of your pelvic floor muscles. It enhances the control so you can relax and engage effectively in labour. We discussed it already in the last episode, but this doesn't mean doing sit-ups and crunches and planks, etc. It means exercise that focus on your breathing and how your breathing interacts with your core muscles, how to activate the pelvic floor muscles and abdominals and relax as well. Relaxing them is just as important, and Kegels are obviously very important and will help after birth as well. We'll discuss them a little bit later on maybe. Next thing we're going to discuss are C-sections, which are really, really common these days. I think there's something like 30% of all births in the developed world. Are you still allowed to call it the developed world? You used to learn about that in geography, didn't we? I don't know if that's completely correct now, but there's very C-section. So it's a significant portion of all births. Unfortunately, some of the information surrounding C-sections isn't the most helpful for new mums. For one thing, it's sparse. There's not very much of it about. But also there's a lot of myths that have kind of built upon bad advice that have been given out over the years by people who really should know better. For example, you can't exercise for at least 6 weeks after C-section. This just does not make any sense. If you think about it, exercise comes in all sorts of different forms. Performing heavy deadlifts is very different to performing some body weight hip bridges on the floor, for example. And I guess a lot of this bad advice is the result of those who give it out not actually doing exercise themselves, so they don't really understand or know how the body works, what's appropriate and what isn't, and how different exercises impact the body. So the fact is that you can do exercise after a couple of weeks if you feel like it. It will probably make you feel better, much better than sitting about like a planted pot for 2 or 3 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever they recommend. Some stretches, breath work, glute activation, pelvic floor work, and working your deeper core muscles, things like that I don't mean heavy deadlifting or heavy squatting or heavy bench press. I don't mean doing anything too strenuous. Probably if you're lifting something as heavy as your baby, that's about as heavy as you probably want to be lifting for the first number of weeks. That's a given. But saying you should do no exercise, I don't think that's going to help anybody. Walking, of course, is considered exercise. Again, depending on the situation. I've said before that walking isn't exercise. It isn't exercise if you are fully fit, fully healthy. If you're recovering from pregnancy, if you're recovering from giving birth, it can be considered exercise, I would say. Certainly don't jump into lifting whatever you were lifting, the weights you were lifting 9 or 10 months ago before you had the baby. Pay attention just to how your body feels. Resistance bands, they can be really helpful as well. There's lots of things you can do with them. Many women also avoid doing pelvic floor training because they've had a C-section, and I would say this is a big mistake. If you think about it, just by carrying your baby around for 9 months, it can put excessive strain on your pelvic floor muscles, and that's regardless of the means of delivery. So don't be surprised if you have some incontinence or low back pain or pelvic pain after giving birth, even via C-section. Not only the weight and the pressure of the developing baby can cause pelvic floor issues, but also the hormones released after birth. They can cause connective tissues in the body to start softening. So this basically means the reactivity and the strength of the pelvic floor muscles can be compromised. I would highly recommend you get checked out by a pelvic floor specialist before you return to the gym or before you return to exercise to do any heavy lifting, certainly, just to be on the safe side. So even if your doctor doesn't advise it, I still think it's a really smart idea to ensure you're recovered sufficiently to return to exercise. And then whenever you do, I'd still start quite easy, quite light. Learn to master your own body weight again, doing side planks, squats, split squats, banded pull-aparts, that sort of thing. And diastasis recti is another important issue to discuss. I think we'll be doing you a disservice if we didn't talk about it. It's another really common occurrence after pregnancy. This is whenever the abdominal wall separates to allow the baby to grow and the bump to expand. So basically, the linea alba, that's the connective tissue that runs along your midline, sort of from your sternum down to your pubic bone. It softens, becomes a lot more lax, and this allows the abdominal wall to expand during pregnancy. The goal, whenever you're pregnant, should be to minimise this separation. And after birth, it's all about trying to allow it to heal as best you can, create the best possible conditions for it to heal. When I asked if they're going to check on my wife, I was really surprised that no one even mentioned it or asked her about it. And whenever I asked them, were they going to check, they sort of looked at me as if I had two heads. And hopefully this isn't a common occurrence. Hopefully this is a rarity and it's a one-off. But other new mums hopefully haven't experienced this. You can, of course, check yourself to evaluate the separation after you've given birth. If you sort of half know what you're doing, what you're looking for, which professionals who calls the check on a mother after giving birth in the days and weeks following really should know and should be done, in my opinion. I was really surprised about that. You can let me know if you've experienced something similar. If the separation is severe enough with no signs of healing up, you might need to get an operation. It isn't particularly common. I guess it's more common in women who've had a few babies, especially big babies, and if you've got quite a small frame, but it is sometimes necessary. So don't be afraid to ask questions and get assessed if you aren't sure. That's what they're there for. It's part of their job and it's what they're trained to do, among lots of other important things. One of my clients, whenever she came back to me, she mentioned that her separation, she mentioned her separation to her doctor and said, like, I've got this diastasis recti, what do you think I should do? How can I get it fixed? And to quote the doctor, I don't know their name, I don't know what doctor it was, I'm not going to entertain doing that, but I don't really care. Sometimes I should care, but the doctor said, don't know if it was a man or a woman, who knows, said, just do some core work, that'll help, set up some crunches, that sort of thing. That's pretty much verbatim what they said. The idea was, do sit-ups and crunches. My jaw hit the floor whenever she shared this with me. I was like, what? Are you serious? I was like, you have to be joking me. Avoiding these exercises if you've had diastasis, if you've got diastasis recti, is just about the first thing you learn in diastasis recti 101. The phrase stay in your lane has been thrown about an awful lot in the last 2 years, and anyone who happens to express an opinion on what's on the news, what happens to pop up in the news, and that phrase happens to spring to my mind here, but I'm not going to say it. But just to sum up, if your doctor happens to tell you to do sit-ups or crunches to fix your diastasis recti, don't do it. Don't do that. And on a side note, you might want to think about getting a new doctor. Just a thought. We touched on this already, but the pelvic floor is a topic that it's often talked about, but it's rarely done. Rarely do new mothers or expectant mothers actually do much with their pelvic floor. Most new mothers, to be honest, don't really think about it or realise how important it is to train the pelvic floor until after they've had a baby, and for the days and weeks after they find that they're incontinent. And it can really be a frightening time, and maybe something that you weren't warned about. Whenever it happens, you maybe have lots of questions. What, will I always be like this? Will I ever recover? You might fear, even leaving the house in case it happens whenever you're out for a walk and you bump into somebody and you've got a big wet patch or a trickle run down your leg. But for other women, they won't even notice anything is different until they start doing something like exercising again. Whenever they try something that involves jumping or bouncing or any sort of impact exercise, they'll get a bit of leakage to greater or lesser extents. It is common, but it shouldn't be considered normal, and it shouldn't be just something you put up with or accept, because there's something you can do about it. You might need to go to a specialist pelvic floor physiotherapist. You might need to discipline yourself to do some basic pelvic floor training. It could be a lot more complex than that. That's as simple as it is, but it might be a lot more complex than that. It's estimated that 1 in 3 women experience incontinence. Now, I believe this is actually higher than that stat. I would say it's higher than that. I'm not gonna hazard a guess as to how much higher, but I think it's higher due to my experience in working with women in the gym. It's not uncommon for a woman to kind of approach me privately and ask if she could switch skipping for another exercise. Even mothers whose kids have grown up, they've maybe just put up with it for 15 or 20 years without ever getting anything done about it. They just tried to avoid running or skipping or other activities that could set them off. It's really nothing to be ashamed about. It doesn't, or embarrassed about. It doesn't have to be tolerated. But it kind of annoys me that more women are neglected in this way. No one has ever told them after they've had a baby that incontinence is common, and here's what you should do about it. Help is available. It's a real shame, and that women have had to live with this for 10, 15, 20 plus years. The actual term for it is stress urinary incontinence, so it's SUI for short, and the leaking is a sign that the whole system is breaking down. It's not just your pelvic floor muscles. That's kind of the last barrier, but it's the pelvic floor that's kind of acknowledged most often. There's other associated issues, things like low back pain, hip pain, glute pain, pubic symphysis pain. Many women experience other issues like groin strains, IT band syndrome, knee pain, and other. They want treatment for those specific things, but it could actually be pointing to something which is something else, which is why it's important to give your physio the full picture and be honest if you experience incontinence. There's a lot of physios will ask a woman, do you experience incontinence? Like, oh no, because they don't want to be embarrassed. Like who wants to just you wet yourself? But it's common, so don't feel like you're alone or you're on your own. And it is important to tell people in confidence that it happens to you. It might seem unrelated, but it really could be helpful in your physio trying to connect the dots and treat you for what is actually going on, not just your tissue damage and your groin strain or your knee pain or whatever. If you experience leakage when you do exercise, impact exercise, coughing or sneezing, don't put up with it. Do seek help. Even if your GP says you're fine, you'll be grand, you're in charge of your own health. You're in charge. You're the one who calls the shots. So get yourself seen to. There's a really good physiotherapist. I might try and stick her details in the notes. If you're in Ireland here in Northern Ireland, over at Warringstown, I'm sure there's lots of other great ones across the country, but I've had her details in the gym for several years now. But whenever I first realised this becoming an issue, it was an issue for several clients. You might have issues with your pelvic floor muscle control, so either engaging or relaxing them. If you're engaging them too much and you can't relax them, that can be an issue. That can be a cause of weakness. It's like having a constantly contracted muscle and not being able to relax it. Or it could be issues with your diaphragm. So this is why it's important to get looked at by a specialist in this area. It might be as simple as them teaching you how to contract your pelvic floor muscles, how to relax them in conjunction with your breathing. It could be a lot more complex, but they will assess you, they will know, and they will help you through it. So don't feel you're on your own. I could give you loads of tips on like doing Kegels and stuff, trying to suck everything up to the inside you, but there's lots of other pelvic floor protocols. You probably find them on YouTube and elsewhere. But the problem is, I could give you those and tell you to do those, but it could do more harm than good if there's something more complex going on and something else that needs to be addressed. The pelvic floor, it is way, way, way more important than most people realise. Certainly more important than I realised before I started training both pregnant women and women who've given birth. For both men and women, mothers and non-mothers, it's really, really important working it in conjunction with your core and your diaphragm, your breathing. But if you do experience leakage from impact, get seen to, okay? Get a specialist and get it fixed. Don't just put up with it. Don't put up with the pressure and the shame or the embarrassment or the feeling that could happen at any moment, or I hope you don't sneeze kind of thing. Go get seen to. So what about breastfeeding? If you have opted to breastfeed or you're thinking of breastfeeding, and I don't want to get into any debate about bottle feeding or breastfeeding, what matters most is the baby's getting fed, right? Agreed? This can be a real point of judgment or contention, and it really shouldn't be. It's nobody's business but yours, your partner and your baby, really, okay? Do what's right for you and your circumstances and for your baby. Don't worry about the opinions or judgments or thoughts of others who don't matter in the grand scheme of things. All that being said, we're going to discuss breastfeeding and first of all some of the benefits that come from it. And this shouldn't be looked upon as a comparative way. I'm not trying to disparage bottle feeding and say breastfeeding is or trying to be condescending towards bottle feeding in comparison. We're simply going to look at the things that have been proven, some of the proven benefits of breastfeeding. So for one thing, breast milk is a nutritionally complete source of food, and it has been shown that it can help actually reduce the chances of your child developing diabetes and obesity later in life. Now, obviously, there's other mitigating factors. There's factors such as their lifestyle later on. It's one thing being breastfed, and then it doesn't mean you can eat whatever you want and eat all the sugar and all the crap, or feed your child all that crap. It just sets them up better for life, really, to avoid those things, and it provides the exact nutrients that your baby needs to grow and develop optimally. Aside from high quantities of vitamin D, which we will discuss a little bit later. But breastfeeding not only has physical benefits for the baby, but also psychological benefits as well. It helps the mother and the baby to bond and helps prevent postpartum depression. Some other benefits to you as a mother are it actually helps reduce your chances of developing type 2 diabetes. So these are long-term benefits: rheumatoid arthritis, breast cancer, things like that. An interesting side note that you maybe didn't realise, and certainly I didn't realise, is that breastfeeding causes a release of the hormone oxytocin, and this enables your uterus to contract faster, and so you start to heal quicker. I knew that you released oxytocin in the following days, but I didn't realise that it had that impact on the uterus, which is quite an interesting one when I was researching all of this a little bit more. So there's lots of reasons why breastfeeding may not be possible, even if you really wanted to or you plan to. Maybe the baby has trouble latching on, maybe milk production's down, it's reduced and the baby can't get enough, maybe it's causing you pain or discomfort. There's lots of reasons why it might not work out for you, so don't put pressure on yourself or feel bad about it if you can't, even if you've always planned to or really wanted to. There are other options, obviously formula, or you could try pumping and feeding with a bottle. I'm not here to try and give you all this sort of advice around feeding, but just to kind of, as a side note, it's something I guess I've been through as a parent looking on, and just sort of into that age now, I guess, where you get a bit of experience and chat to other parents, but also from a more professional standpoint. We're going to get into that as well, and the training and nutrition side of things. But chatting to your health professional, whoever that is, can really help ensure your technique's right, first of all, and that you're holding the baby the right way. Make it easy for them to latch on. The old rugby ball technique is a common one, I believe. Then with regard to nutrition and breastfeeding, that's what we really want to talk about. It's so important that you're getting enough calories in, first of all. Everybody's different, so everyone's going to require a slightly different amount of calories. There's no easy, quick ratio or equation that you can help figure this out. Some people estimate between 400 and 500 extra calories on top of what you would need if you weren't breastfeeding, so based upon your height, weight, age, activity level. But the fact is, you're an individual, and there are so many factors that are going to determine your calorie needs. The important thing is that you are eating regularly, you're eating enough calories. Certainly, it's not the time to try and lose weight or lose body fat or get a slimmer waist. Otherwise, what can happen is this can start interrupting your milk supply, and your baby will not be happy. Believe me, they will not be happy. I'm not happy whenever I don't get my food, so you can imagine how annoyed they'll be. And they can't really express their anger in kind of commutable ways that we can. So now that you know you need to get enough calories, what should those calories consist of? First of all, you've guessed it, protein. Protein is one of the main ingredients in breast milk, and at a minimum, they reckon you need between 1 and 1.2 grams of protein per 1 kilo of body weight per day. And you can get this from all the usual suspects: eggs, beef, salmon, chicken, turkey, peas, beans, your other dairy products like cheese and milk. Whey protein as well is a really good, quick option. In those early days, you'd be glad to get anything down your neck. Fats as well, so especially omega-3 and omega-6 are really important to consume in sufficient quantities. Helps your baby's brain development. So again, eggs, salmon, seeds, nuts and nut butters, all excellent sources. And then fruit and veg for their fibre content, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. If you think about all that we're actually talking about, it's kind of what us PTs bang on about all the time. Whether you're pregnant or not, whether you're looking after a baby or not, whether you're breastfeeding or not, man or woman, young or old, we should be doing all these things on a regular basis and focusing on all of these. I guess it just means it matters a little bit more because if there's a new mother and there's another life depending on what you eat, it's no longer just about yourself. So the more variety of fruit and veg you can get in, the better. But obviously, the more you like certain ones, it's going to be easier to eat them, isn't it? It's going to be easier to revert to those in the quantities required for optimal health and quality breastfeeding. Carbs like oats, sweet potatoes, standard white potatoes, rice, quinoa or quinoa as I like to call it, couscous are all excellent choices and are even more important if you've started exercising again to replenish your glycogen stores that you're going to be depleting. Something else to point out, I guess, is your 3 square meals a day, might go out the window. You might end up grazing little and often all day, which is fine. If it works for you, brilliant. So don't feel you have to eat 3 big meals per day. You might get hungry and before that, or you need your meals split up into smaller portions and you just grab smaller ones whenever you want throughout the day. It's one of the benefits of those early days being at home with the baby. Calcium. So calcium is really important to consider, and you'll need probably about the same amount as normal, but just ensure you're getting it. So 1,000 milligrams per day. Milk, other dairy foods are obviously great sources, quite obvious sources, but you can also get it from kale, turnip, cabbage, bok choy, canned fish like sardines or salmon. Vitamin D, it really is essential for everyone, especially us in the northern parts of the world where we don't get much sunlight or get enough sunlight. So it's really important, but especially for breastfeeding mothers. Oddly enough, we actually don't get enough in breast milk. It's not there in sufficient quantities. We're hoping to actually get a vitamin D expert on the program, on the show next year. So he's going to go into a bit more depth for everybody. How that's in the works. So look out for that early in the new year. But among other things, vitamin D, it helps promote your bones, give you healthy bones, and prevent rickets. And as I said earlier, it's quite low in breast milk. And I guess in some countries it's going to be higher. In some countries you're not going to need as much because you're going to help develop it in your body through sunlight. But some studies have found that whenever expectant mothers started supplementing with 2,000 international units of vitamin D3 at 27 weeks gestation, it has significantly increased the presence of vitamin D in their breast milk. So they can also obviously start from that from earlier on, but that's what that study showed. And then you can also directly give your baby about 400 international units of vitamin D3 per day in drop form. So our wee girl has been getting that in the first years or first months of her life. Next thing we want to talk about is getting enough water on board. So again, it's important for everybody. I'm always on about hydration, giving out bottles and water bottles and things, but especially breastfeeding mothers. Funnily enough, the primary ingredient in breast milk is water. So making sure you're hydrated adequately is really, really important. You're going to be the one to suffer, mother, if you aren't getting enough water. So I know you like to think you're putting your baby first and all, but the baby will take all your milk. The baby will take all your moisture from your body through the milk, and then you suffer things like dizziness, confusion, a bit of moodiness, even kidney or bladder infection can result. So if your partner or husband, whoever, says well, you're not be saying it, maybe thinks you're being a bit moody, you can blame it on dehydration. Tell them to go get you a drink of water. So it's not what you want after you just brought a baby home from hospital. You don't want to endure any of those. Alcohol is something else that we should discuss. Ideally, it's to be avoided whenever you're breastfeeding, because it can be transferred via milk. And if you do happen to have a drink, you want to make sure you're going to delay breastfeeding for a number of hours afterwards, just to minimise the chances of it being transmitted to the baby. Caffeine, again, is something else. It can seem like a really necessary supplement in the early days, in those early weeks, to get you through the long days after sleepless nights. But it can lead to a vicious cycle of more agitation for your baby and more interrupted sleep, not sleeping well, and then you'll probably need, want to drink more caffeine and get more coffee into you or whatever. And it really pains me to advise you not to drink caffeine, because I love coffee, but it might be best to avoid it if you can. You've probably made it this far, so through your pregnancy and stuff, with a little caffeine. And then another thing is, if you see if your baby starts to get things like colic symptoms, eczema, wheezing, starts vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, hives, or things like a stuffy, itchy nose, that could be the sign that your baby is sensitive to dairy, and you might need to mention it to your health professional, health visitor, GP, paediatrician, whoever it is that you chat to. It might suggest you need to cut out some dairy, curb it at least, have a chat with them, let them assess, and then they'll probably advise on that. But something to be aware of. And then something else that my wife experienced whenever she was feeding in the early days and weeks was upper back pain. This is something that I guess she wasn't warned about, and nobody really talked about it, and she didn't hear anybody else complain about it, but it was due to the posture of breastfeeding. So how your shoulders round over and your head's tucked down, looking at your beautiful little baby, little bundle of joy, they're all so cute, and your upper back's all rounded as well and rolled forward for extended periods of time, because the baby just feeds in those early days. And this wasn't something that was talked about, because after what a new mother's been through, it can seem like quite a minor problem. It doesn't really seem like significant enough to mention. But one great way to actually help alleviate this discomfort is, obviously a back massage is nice, but getting a foam roller or stacking loads of pillows up behind you whenever you are breastfeeding to support your upper back and your shoulders. But getting a foam roller is a great one. So the area of your back where your ribcage fits around is called the thoracic spine. And if you lie in this area on your back on the foam roller, give yourself a really tight hug, wrap your arms around the front, and then roll back and forth while you lift your hips. It's a great way to alleviate discomfort, massage all that tight tissue around your spine and shoulder blades, and it can really help to loosen up your upper back and shoulders that do become really tight and stiff. So what should your training look like after you've given birth? I'd recommend sticking with gentle stretching, bodyweight squats, short walks, some pelvic floor work, and some breath work in the after the first 2 weeks or so. First 2 weeks, just chill out, just recover, just pretend you've just had a major operation and you're just trying to simultaneously look after a new little baby. So that's kind of what happened. After that, you can start exploring other things. So the most important thing to keep in mind is that the fact that your body is recovering. Like we said, it's recovering from a major life and body changing event, major trauma, a major incident, if you want to describe it like that. So prioritize how your body's recovering instead of worrying about how much body fat you have or what size your waist is at this time. That is the last thing that you really need to be worrying about or thinking about, and nobody else is going to be thinking about it either. You can start thinking about that much later down the line and trying to get that baby, that pregnancy weight off, but exercise to feel good rather than just merely thinking about burning calories. Burning calories is not what you want. You want to retain calories, you want to give them to your little beautiful baby to make it grow big and strong. Listen to your body and don't overdo things. So if something doesn't feel right, don't do it. If something feels like a wee bit too much, just pull back a wee bit. I can't stress the importance enough of easing back gently into exercise. And of course, if you didn't train before you got pregnant, your approach to fitness is going to be an awful lot different than someone who had a lifestyle of training and trained throughout their pregnancy. Starting gently will be the only approach, and you might be wise waiting for a little bit longer after you've had your baby compared to someone who was active before and during their pregnancy right up till the due date. Your recovery is incredibly important. I can't stress that enough. If you don't do it properly, it's going to set you back. It's important for men and women, even without the consideration of having had a baby. If you're training really hard and you aren't recovering, or if you're just training a little bit and you aren't recovering, that's a problem. It's not only going to make training feel much harder, it's going to make you more susceptible to injuries and things. So part of this comes down to having a really smart training program that won't beat the crap out of you just to burn energy for the sake of burning calories, but one that's going to allow you to recover adequately, not leave you feeling sore and tired and broken, but ultimately will serve a bigger purpose, like either getting stronger or increasing your cardiovascular output, something like that. It's going to benefit you long term, and it's going to benefit your health. After you've had a baby, the quantity of sleep you get really is beyond your control. I hate to break it to you, especially long uninterrupted sleep. Those days are gone. They're gone. They're just gone, at least for a while. So what can you do about that? Naps. Naps are so important. More important than getting the dishes done or getting the hoovering, getting laundry done or anything like that. I am going to say that because I'm a man, not right? But naps are going to be really crucial in those early days. If you don't know how to nap, start learning. Google it. Go to some sort of a self-help napping guide. Try and learn how to nap. Train yourself to nap. The SAS guys have to train themselves how to nap whenever they're on missions, because they're not going to get 8 hours sleep. They maybe sleep 15 minutes. And that's it, and they have to move on, do something else, sleep 15 minutes, move on. You're going to have to do that. Pretend you're in the special forces. So whenever your baby sleeps, you're sleeping. But aside from that, improving your sleep density or sleep quality is within your control as well. So preparing to sleep during the day, making your room cool enough to sleep in, avoiding blue light like your phone, your tablet, your TV before going to sleep, putting a filter on it if you need to, still look at your phone those late hours. Make sure the room is dark enough. Use white noise if necessary. By the way, white noise is a great one to help keep your baby sleeping too, by blocking out loud, sudden bangs, thumps, loud sounds. Supplements as well, like melatonin, have been shown to really be effective at aiding your sleep, as well as zinc and magnesium. We dealt with sleep in a lot more depth a few weeks ago on an episode, so you can check that out. Touched on it already, but caffeine, it'll also hinder your sleep as well as your baby's sleep, so especially if you breastfeed them. So if you're hopefully made it through the pregnancy without much caffeine or any caffeine, so you can sustain that a little bit longer, it's going to be a win-win. You will benefit from that. The main thing is don't stress. If you start stressing, you're going to get less sleep. You're going to get less sleep anyway, to be honest. So it's just a fact, just accepting that and just trying to make the most of whatever sleep you can do, and try and get deep, dense, quality sleep whenever you can do. You're going to have to get up and feed the baby during the night in the early days, and this is just beyond your control. I'm going to finish off chatting a bit about nutrition. It's something that can really go out the window after birth. And we're going to talk about it more from a practical point of view here than a detailed macronutrient or micronutrient point of view. But men expecting mothers are so dialed in whenever it comes to things like not eating too much fish, high in mercury, or avoiding those things, or avoiding soft cheeses or eggs without the lion stamp, all that sort of stuff. Whenever you're pregnant, those things are really important and emphasised, and we all are quite well educated in that now. But your nutrition after giving birth, it's equally as important, especially if you're breastfeeding, as we touched on earlier. But if you haven't had your baby yet, you might not realise how difficult this is in practice. Just remembering or getting time to eat at all can be really, really difficult when you're looking after a little beautiful tiny new human who is totally dependent on you for survival and to take care of its every need. Let's face it, nutritionally dense meals take more time to prepare than the more convenient options, and that's true whether you have had a baby or not. Instead of feeling really bad, feeling bad for not eating like an athlete, or worrying about how much fat or how many calories are in what you're eating, think about just packing in the stuff we talked about already in the breastfeeding section, but things like protein whenever you can. Not so you can train immediately, not because because protein actually does help you repair. It helps repair tissue and healing to occur, and it helps to keep you fuller and more satisfied for longer than things like carbs and fats. Remember, your body has been through an awful lot, and there will be some damage done potentially, whether you've had a vaginal birth or a C-section. So repair work will be necessary. Getting enough protein is a really great way to do this. Your body it's come under immense pressure due to the intensity of birthing. You've expended vast amounts of energy, both in labour and birthing, and it's really important that you replenish that energy by eating a decent, varied diet in the early days as much as you can. It's never going to be perfect, but if you bear in mind when your body, bear in mind what your body has been through and what you can do for it nutritionally to help. So the last thing, said it earlier, but the last thing you should really be thinking about is in the early days and the weeks after you've had a baby is getting into a calorie deficit. The things that I always emphasise for most people is getting into a calorie deficit if you're trying to lose weight, shifting body fat gain during pregnancy. Forget about those things. Forget about it. Throw it out the window. Forget about it. And again, this might be easy for me to say as a man because it can really affect your confidence and all that sort of stuff. I get it. But it really is the least important thing in the world at that particular moment in time after you've had a baby. If you're breastfeeding, you're going to, as we said earlier, you're going to need extra calories, and not every day is going to be the same amount. If you had a tough night of feeding, you might need to have a huge breakfast and a bit less later on during the day. Maybe Monday will require 3,000 calories and Tuesday might only need 2,300. The point is, don't count your calories. This is not the time. Eat to replenish, help your body to repair and to fill it up, and just enjoy it as well. Enjoy your food. Not only should you eat lots of protein, but loads of fibre, like we chatted about earlier as well. That's going to help you keep feeling full. So there's lots of fibre in things like vegetables, and they're also going to give you lots of vitamins and minerals, like we touched upon in the breastfeeding segment. And then the early days after birth will mean little sleep, disrupt sleep, like we said, and you're going to try and get your energy from somewhere. Anywhere. So snacks are going to be I need something. I'm going to you get cravings. It's not going to be like a crazy weird cravings, I guess, whenever you're pregnant. You hear people like eating cold and all sorts of stuff. I don't know, but you'll still get cravings nonetheless. Probably for chocolate, chocolate and sugary sweets and things like that. Probably not fruit, but it's probably not a bad idea to get some really high quality snacks stocked up and ready to go for you. High protein yogurts. Things that you can turn to whenever you just need something that will help you and leave you satisfied. It's also really hard to go wrong if you keep it simple rather than complicating things with elaborate recipes or worrying about the tiny details. Just buy simple whole foods that are edible on their own, if necessary, or just need a few other ingredients, a few accessories. So things like eggs, cheese, butcher's ham, bacon, tubs of hummus, quick rice. Stock up on fruit in your fruit bowl, get it filled up, chicken, pre-made salads, all that sort of stuff. And if you can get your groceries delivered, even better. See if you're having to go out of the house and wasting time faffing about. Or another idea is to stock up on all that sort of stuff before you've had the baby. You might have a bit more time. Well, you will have a lot more time because whenever the baby arrives, you'll have no time. So use that time before the baby arrives to stock up, put stuff in the freezer, and then you can use it afterwards. Well, that is about it. I think we've discussed all we need to discuss. Time flies when you're having fun and talking about some of the unmentionable aspects of pregnancy and beyond. Nothing is off limits for us here to discuss. But in all seriousness, I think part of the reason there are so many misconceptions and maybe a lack of knowledge and some confusion around pregnancy and training and stuff, and after having a baby, what life looks like, how it feels, a lot of times because we don't talk about the uncomfortable details, the kind of embarrassing details, or what are perceived to be embarrassing details, and especially guys, we don't discuss it, or we don't think about it quite often, and that's like 50% of the population. So it's a big chunk of people who don't know what the crap is going on. And then I think it snowballs because men don't want to discuss it, they don't want to hear about it, and they're not interested. It means that women start thinking that they shouldn't discuss it, or that they should be embarrassed about things like bleeding after birth, or peeing themselves doing a workout, or jumping off a step, or diastasis recti, or breast milk leaking out, all these things. But they shouldn't be embarrassed. These are all really common incidences after giving birth, that almost every new mother experiences, and certainly like every new mother will experience at least one of those, if not more, after they give birth. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to accept all those. Some of those things are can be treated, and some of them can be overcome, and all the things are it's just the way the body is. It's just human nature. But hopefully having conversations like this will normalise it and bring it out in the open and clear up some of the confusion and some of the the unknown elements of training after you have had a baby. Okay, it's joke of the week time, and we're going to keep it family orientated. So there was a father and a son, and they were chatting, and the son said to the dad, "Dad, can you tell me what a solar eclipse is?" And the dad said, "No, son." Right, that is the end of the show. Thank you for joining me, for keeping me company once again this week. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, where else are we on? Google Podcasts, Podbay, probably a few other places we're batting about on the internet as well. Do share it with friends. Don't forget to check out some of the older episodes too. We're coming to 30 episodes now, so there's been many hours of content and lots of different topics discussed, and all sorts of weird and wonderful guests. And you can listen and decide, and you tell me which ones you thought were weird and which ones were wonderful, which ones I was referring to. Anyway, it's Black Friday. You're probably driving home from the shops listening now, without your dignity attached. You've lost that hours ago after fighting with a stranger trying to get a 43-inch television from Curry's or something. Don't forget, you can still spend local £100 voucher with us at Cross Functional Fitness. Lots of our different services. And come and try one of our classes from just £3.37 per class. £3.37. Like you can barely get a bar of chocolate or even a coffee for that nowadays with inflation. But there's no inflation here at Cross Functional Fitness. We deal in real terms, real currency, the currency of fitness. You can't print counterfeit fitness like you can print money. Anyway, I've talked enough. Hope you have had a good Thanksgiving. If you're listening and you happen to be American, if you are listening elsewhere in the world, I hope you had a good Thursday, the 25th of November 2021. And I'll catch you here next week, same place, same time on Strength for Tomorrow Radio. Train today so you can be stronger tomorrow.